Cast brought to you by Tiger Wheel and Tire.
This week, highlights of Day 3 of the Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race, Round 4 of the Absa Off-Road Championship.
Downtown Gaborone provides the backdrop to the biggest sporting and social occasion of the year in Botswana. The Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race is traditionally the halfway mark in the Absa Off-Road Championship, and this year was again based at the village of Akumakwane on the outskirts of Gaborone. For Botswana, the Toyota 1000 Desert Race is an event that carries with it significant economic as well as social benefits.
The proceeds that we make here and there around the race, we actually go in to help the community in Kumakwane. So there's a lot of social benefits. The businesses in Gaborone, the capital city and surrounds, you know, hotels, filling stations, everybody, even the small, medium-scale operators, is of great economic benefit.
Over the race weekend, Botswana swings into party mode, with huge crowds that are both festive and enthusiastic flocking to vantage points along the route. Crowd and traffic control are a major headache, and an army of police personnel are mobilized to deal with safety and security.
Well, because we attach so much safety in it, we have assembled around 800 plus minus officers for this particular event. What we want to emphasize is the safety of both the competitors and the spectators as well.
The Toyota 1000 Desert Race is the only marathon event on the Absa Off-Road Championship calendar, and the first racing section was dominated by the two-team Castrol Toyota Hilux entries of Duncan Foss and Rob Howie and Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin. They led the production vehicle category ahead of the RFS BMW of Christian de Ploy and Henk Janse van Vieren and the My Karen XL Toyota of Hugo de Bruin and Henry Hugo. The motorized pair of Evan Hutchison and Donnie Stassen held sway in the special vehicle category, with this year's desert race taking on an extra dimension by being included in the Dakar Challenge. The prize for winning the Dakar Challenge was a free entry into next year's Dakar Rally in South America, and saw production vehicle as well as special vehicle crews racing against each other for the only time this season.
The event was one of 4 events worldwide counting towards the Dakar Challenge, which was open to competitors who had never before competed on the Dakar Rally. At the end of the first racing section, made up of 2 loops of 218 kilometers, Pretoria crew Christian de Ploy and Henk Janse van Vieren led the Dakar Challenge from Evan Hutchison and Donnie Stassen, with Hugo de Bruin and Henry Hugo lying third. For national championship competitors, there was an additional incentive via an extra allocation of points for the Toyota Desert Race. Under the rules and regulations, competitors who failed to finish Racing Section 1 could also enter Racing Section 2 and would be eligible to earn a reduced allocation of points.
Down the years, this marathon event has earned the reputation as the toughest race on the Absa National Championship calendar, and is the race everyone wants to win. It was first run in 1975, moved to Botswana in 1991, and this year celebrated 31 years of Toyota sponsorship. With the 2 Castrol Toyota Hilux entries out in front of the production vehicle category by around 7 minutes, there were high hopes in the Toyota camp of a first factory team win on their own event since 1999.
The Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 is never all plain sailing. There is traditionally a high rate of attrition, and competitors are well aware that this is a race that is never won on the first racing section. Apart from the production and special category frontrunners, there were standout performances from class leaders in Louis Weichelt and Marek Besadenhout, Dirk Putter and Koos Claessens and Richard Fuller and Dennis Murphy. But for others, progress was occasionally interrupted.
Potential disaster is always around the next corner or behind the next tree or bush, and a final desert race appearance for 6 times winner Hannes Grobler ended in disappointment. For Racing Section 1 survivors, it's a long day in a cramped and noisy office with dust and hidden dangers along the route waiting to catch you out. Off-road racing on marathon events boils down to the survival of the fittest.
off-road racing vehicles take a terrific pounding, and on an event like the Toyota 1000 need to be ready to fight another day. Teams of skilled and dedicated technicians work late into the night to make sure their chargers are ready for battle the next day.
Ons het 'n dag vol adventures gehad. Ons het goed begin. Ons het baie goed gery. Ons het die ouens verbygevat en ons het goed aangekom op die BMW. Ongelukkig kon ons net die stof was net te erg om verby te kom. Ons het uiteindelik verbygekom en goed gegaan en tot so 20 km voor die einde. Ons was derde van die produksievoertuie. Toe breek ons agterste skokbreker en ons moes toe huppel na die einde toe, maar ons het hier gekom. Ons het nuwe shocks ingesit. So môre is 'n nuwe dag. Ongelukkig so 2 plekke verloor in die proses, maar ons gaan alles gee om môre in te haal.
On the production vehicle front, a massive lead for the two-team Castrol Hilux entries, with Dakar Challenge leaders Deploy and Janse van Vieren in third. A steady day one took Class D leaders Weichelt and Besaidenout into the top 10. Turning to the special vehicles, there was a comfortable lead for Hutchison and Stassen ahead of Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson. In Class P, the Regent Racing crew of Richard Fuller and Dennis Murphy were well clear of John Thompson and Clinton McNamara.
An African sunrise heralded the final racing section of the Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race. And after 436 kilometers of racing, just 11 seconds separated two Toyota Hiluxes.
Yeah, look, both the cars are fantastic, and Anthony's a really fast driver. So yeah, I could see he was on our tail the whole day. We were driving as fast. I was driving as fast as I could. So there wasn't much more to come from me. So both of us are on the pace.
There was an electric atmosphere as crowds gathered at the restart, but foremost in the mind of former South African champion Quinton Solvalt was simply seeing out the distance.
Obviously, I've got a lot of experience racing here with my dad, but behind the wheel for the first time, so it's a completely new experience. I'm having a hell of a lot of fun, so learning every day, and just want to get to the finish today and get all 1,000 kilometers behind me.
Intense concentration from some crews on the start line was mixed with a more relaxed approach from other drivers and co-drivers. For the two-team Castrol Toyota crews at the front of the field, the first priority was to secure the squad's first Toyota 1000 Desert Race victory since 1999. The first 100 kilometers of the route followed part of the course for the Friday prologue to determine start positions before heading towards Lenswelatu. Ahead of competitors were 2 laps of a 200-kilometer course that would again test men and machines to the maximum.
The route for racing section 1 was tight and twisty, and crews were hoping the day 2 course would open up a bit. At the front of the field, it was business as usual for Voss and Howie. In the lead, Team Castrol Toyota Hilux and teammates Taylor and Birkin. The two Castrol Toyotas started the day almost 7 minutes clear of the RFS BMW X3 of Deploy and Janse van Vieren, and there was no need for them to engage in the sort of combat that could end in tears for either of both crews.
There was an early bonus for Hutchison and Stassen when Deploy and Janse van Vieren were hit by a puncture at around 10 kilometers into the route, and the pair went sailing past the RFS BMW and took over the lead in the Dakar Challenge.
The Motorite Bat crew started the day 6.5 minutes ahead of Van Staden and Lawrenson in the Atlas Copco Bat, and were in something of a comfort zone at the front of the Special Vehicle Brigade.
A lot of overnight work had gone into the My Karen XL Toyota of De Bruyn and Hicho, with the Northwest crew under early pressure from former South African champions Chris Visser and Japie Barnehorst in the factory Ford Racing Ranger. The Ford pair were being chased by Van Staden and Lawrenson, who were running second in the special vehicle category in the Atlas Copco Bat. They had cut the gap to Hutchison and Stassen, but were still more than 3.5 minutes in arrears. After a disappointing prologue, Van Staden and Lawrenson had gradually picked up the pace and were now comfortably ahead of Quinton Suwald and Father Cully in the Elegant Fuel Bat. The Suwalds are previous desert race winners, but in his first attempt at the Botswana Classic as a driver, the younger Suwald was putting in an impressive display behind the wheel. The Suwalds had quietly moved up the pecking order and were in a position to take advantage of any mistakes from the crews ahead of them.
The The second Ford Racing Ranger in the hands of Lance Woolrich and Ward Huxtable spent most of the racing section eating dust from the Motorride Revo of Nick and Ryan Harper. An early break by the Ford crew then reversed the situation, with the Harper father and son combination running just ahead of Class B leaders Fuller and Murphy in the Regent Racing Bat. Fuller and Murphy taking control of Class B when early leaders Colin Matthews and Alan Smith ran out of petrol on Racing Section 1 and lost more than an hour. Not far behind them, Lawrence and Gerard du Plessis in a Zarko, with the Wolmerandstad brothers being chased by Dion Venter and Ian Palmer in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux. They were over a minute clear of brothers-in-law Terence Marsh and Mike Whitehouse, who were sharing driving duties in the Regent Racing Nissan Navara, while Matthew Carlson handled the navigation.
A late sponsorship deal enabled Naeem Musaji and Rayan Badanya to make the trip to Botswana, and a spirited drive had taken the Auto City Porter into the top 10 among the special vehicles. Behind them, Weichelt and Besadenhout were still leading the Class D contingent in the N1 4x4 Toyota Land Cruiser, but were starting to come under some pressure from Thomas Rundle and Ron Moore. After late problems the previous day, the Baden Tyres Services Nissan Navara crew were on a charge and had moved ahead of the Rubicon Racing Ford of Free Staters Loder Brain and Rian Hreiling. Next up, in a little train of Rubicon Racing entries, were team principal Peter Ruthven and Leander Pinnar, who were leading brothers David and Gary White, with both crews in back models.
After the previous day's woes, Colin Matthews and Alan Smith were on a mission in the Century Racing CR3, and dramatic race cam action provides an insight into the risks involved in overtaking on the Toyota 1000 Desert Race.
The Toyota 1000 Desert Race is not only about the frontrunners. Towards the back of the field, crews like Class E leaders Dirk Pitter and Chris Claessens were working their socks off. Willem Vos and Werner Weiss were back in the mix after failing to finish Racing Section 1, with the pair going past Jack and Sorrel Oosthuizen, who were temporarily out of action. A little further up the road, Vos and Weiss went past Pitter and Claessens and the Rubicon Toyota of Pekila Biskachny and Rikus Erasmus, who had also come to a temporary halt. Then it was the turn of Vos and Weiss to pull off the road as the Oosthuizens went barreling past in the LMC Land Rover. Taking advantage of the rule allowing Racing Section 1 casualties to restart the next day were local driver Mogray Mabili and Zelda Niemand in a Zarko. Behind them, Archie Rutherford and Gerard Skutter were soldiering along in the SA Warranties Nissan Navara, with a puncture forcing them to make an unscheduled stop.
Supersport brings you the best of Britain. See the best of Britain with world-class sport on your World of Champions.
She's never been afraid to cause a stir, to push a few buttons, to do whatever it takes in the pursuit of justice. But this time, she's gone too far. How will Brenda lay down the law when she's caught on the wrong side of it? Find out in the gripping final season of The Closer, Tuesdays at 9:30. A-List Entertainment on Mnet Series.
This July on Supersport HD, who can break from the pack in F1? The Proteas take on the world's top test side. Darren Clark tees up his Open Championship defense at Royal Lytham. Vital points are up for grabs in Vodacom Super Rugby. And watch all the games live and in HD. In July, F1, SA Tour to England, the Open Championship, Vodacom Super Rugby, and the London 2012 Olympic Games. HD and sport, made for each other.
From the most southern point of the route, the course wound its way back to race headquarters at Komakwane for a compulsory 20-minute halt. Shortly before the designated service point, the route again linked up with the course utilized on day one of the race for the Donaldson Prologue, which determined the start order. There were no surprises or dramas at the sharp end of the field. The two Toyota Team Castrol Toyota Hilux entries in complete command of proceedings, with Voss and Howie still leading teammates Taylor and Chris Birkin. So far, it had been a near faultless weekend for both crews, but the Toyota 1000 Desert Race is known for producing a sting in the tail, and Toyota supporters were still a little nervous, and for a good reason. Taylor and Birkin were comfortably leading last year's race when a mechanical gremlin within sight of the finish line saw them finish second behind Ford Racing crew of Visser and Badenhorst. This time around, they lost ground just before the designated service point when a puncture dropped them further behind Voss and Howie.
The big motorized bat of former South African champion Evan Hutchison and Dani Stassen was still in control of the special vehicle category, with the pair also leading the Dakar Challenge. After the early puncture that saw them give up the Dakar Challenge lead, Christian de Plooy and Henk Janse van Vieren had encountered no further problems, and an impressive performance from the young Pretoria crew had given them a tight hold on third place among the production vehicles. Behind them, De Bruyn and Hicho had also turned in their best performance of the season, and by contrast to the previous day, the McLaren XL Toyota Hilux still running with most of its body panels intact. De Bruyn and Hicho were keeping at bay defending champions Visser and Badenhorst, who had not been able to make much headway in the Ford Racing Ranger.
The status quo hadn't changed for Van Staden and Lawrenson in the Atlas Copco bat. They were still a solid second behind Hutchison and Stassen in the special vehicle category and trailed the leaders by around 4 minutes. For their part, the Atlas Copco crew were comfortably clear of Quinton and Cully Sulwald, who had quietly gone about consolidating their hold on third place amongst the special vehicles. Considering that he was having only his fourth outing as a driver in the elegant fuel bat, it was an encouraging display from the younger of the Sulwalds, who had 2 South African titles to his name as co-driver. The Sulwalds were running ahead of another father and son combination in Nick and Ryan Harper, who were having their best outing of the season in the Motorite Revo 4x4, previously campaigned by Hutchison and Stassen. The Harpers were maintaining a steady gap ahead of Class B leaders Buller and Murphy, with the Regent Racing bat still being chased by Lodens and Gerard du Plessis in the Zarco.
A little cameo performance was developing between Venter and Palmer in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux and Woolridge and Huxtable in the second of the Ford Racing entries. They were running close together, with the Toyota and the Ford a few minutes ahead of the Regent Racing Nissan Navara, being crewed by Whitehouse, Marsh and Carlson, who had been entrusted with the navigating. The 3 production vehicles were being chased down by Limpopo-based Musaji and Bodhanya, with the Auto City Porter still sounding healthy.
Toyota's hopes of finally getting a monkey off their backs took another step forward when Duncan Voss and Rob Howie were first into the designated service point at Komakwane. So far, the only blemish on the Toyota report card was surrendering first place on the Donaldson Prologue to RFS BMW pair of Hannes Grobler and Henny Testierger.
Everything's under control, car's good, no problem so far. We've had a good run this morning.
The Toyota Cup was starting to overflow when Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin followed their sister car into the DSP, with Dakar Challenge leaders Evan Hutchison and Dani Stassen the first of the special vehicles.
Good loop so far. Got bored after about the 4 millionth tree we went past. Very tight, very sandy. Yeah, opened up a bit at the end. Got a bit of pace going, so I don't know where anyone is behind. We haven't got any news on where anybody is yet. So we're in the lead of our class, and it's been a clean run. So we're just going to try and do one more lap.
Behind the two lead Toyotas, some close battles had developed, but the combination of a tight and twisty course and plenty of dust made overtaking difficult, and there was some frustrated crews.
Yeah, we were there, man. We were there, but unfortunately we in the dust the whole day again. Yeah, what can you do? We're trying, but it's just impossible to overtake.
It had been a frustrating morning for Christian de Plooy and Henk Janse van Vieren, who were now intent on holding on to a podium position.
Yeah, this morning about probably 5 or 10 k's in, we got a flat in the left front. So we had a real quick change, but Evan managed to pass us just as we got back into the car. But other than that, it's very technical out there, especially this morning. There were almost no tracks, only the two Toyotas and Evan went through. So it's very slippery and tight like yesterday, but hopefully it will be more open now with all the cars coming through, and we're just going to try and stay on the podium and make a good finish.
For the survivors who made it to the designated service point, one final challenge remained, and that entailed negotiating the final 200-kilometer loop without falling foul of the Toyota Desert Race's notorious sting in the tail. Voss and Howie were a little over 3 minutes clear of Taylor and Birkin, with a big gap to Dakar Challenge and special vehicle leaders Hutchison and Stassen.
The final loop of the Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race started with Toyota supporters holding thumbs and praying to the racing gods. The end of a 13-year drought for the factory team was in sight, with the two Team Castrol Toyota Hilux entries 1 and 2 on the road. As Duncan Voss and Rob Howie and Anthony Taylor and Chris Birkin left Kumakwani to start the final loop, it was unthinkable that a team which had displayed such dominance over the entire weekend would fall at the final hurdle. But this was motor racing, and anything could happen. To illustrate the point that anything could happen, Hutchison and Stassen were in trouble. As they left the service park, the alternator on the motor right back packed up, and the pair were running without radio communications and GPS navigation. Hutchison and Stassen were literally running on a wing and a prayer, and Christian de Plooy and Henk Janse van Vieren were still very much in the Dakar Challenge picture. Now chasing after the RFS BMW were Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst, who were only seconds behind in the Ford Racing Ranger.
Nothing much had changed throughout the day for Johan van Staden and Mike Lawrenson in the Atlas Copco Bat. They were still running in a solid second place amongst the special vehicles and had been there all day. Behind the Atlas Copco car, the De Bruyn Hugo Mykaran Toyota had finally lost a body panel or two, with the Northwest crew leading the ever-steady Quinton and Cully Solvalt, who had a tight grip on a special vehicle podium finish. The Solvalts were around 4 minutes clear of Nick and Ryan Harper in the Motorite Revo, with the father and son combination still running ahead of Class B leaders Richard Fuller and Dennis Murphy in the Regent Racing Bat.
The Desert Race is a showcase for exhibitionists, but there were no frills for Lawrence and Gerard Duplessis, who were trying to catch Richard Fuller and Dennis Murphy and also stay ahead of the Regent Racing Nissan Navara of Terence Marsh, Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson. The trio had done a fine job over the weekend and had taken the Regent Racing entry ahead of Lance Woolridge and Ward Huxtable in the Ford Racing Ranger, and Thomas Rundle and Johan Moore, who had made up plenty of ground in the Baden Tyre Services Nissan Navara.
A workmanlike performance had paid dividends for Louis Weigelt and Maret Bezuidenhout, who were firmly in control of Class D in the N1 4x4 Toyota Land Cruiser. Behind the Land Cruiser, the ever-aggressive Colin Matthews and Alan Smith were continuing to push hard in what had turned into an adventurous outing for Class B championship leaders.
After their Racing Section 1 trials and tribulations, Matthews and Smith fought a rearguard action to finish second in Class P and keep a 100% finish record this season. Naeem Musaji and Rehan Bodania were a little less adventurous than Matthews and Smith, but did enough to stave off the attentions of Dion Fent and Ian Palmer in a 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux that was looking a little battle-scarred and suffering severe fuel starvation problems that almost cost them the race.
Labus Kochny and Rikus Erasmus in the Rubicon Racing Toyota Hilux were still leading the little Rubicon train, with Peter Rathbun and Leander Pienaar ahead of the brothers David and Gary White. For Rathbun and Pienaar, it was by far the best performance of the season, with the pair holding off the White brothers throughout the day.
Perseverance paid off for Archie Rutherford and Gerard Schutte in the SA Warranties Nissan Navara, with South African champions Herman and Richard Sowald salvaging valuable championship points in the Elegant Fuel Porter. Local pride was also restored with a couple of gutsy final day performances from Botswana drivers Keith Totoy and Mogre Mabile and Dirk Pitter and Chris Claessens, who did a sterling job to dominate Class E and take a third win in 4 starts this season in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux.
Toyota prayers were finally answered when Duncan Voss, Rob Howie and Anthony Taylor, Chris Birkin were given a rapturous welcome at the finish and ended with a flourish to complete a crushing 1-2 triumph for the factory Castrol Toyota squad. Behind them, Evan Hutchison and Donnie Stassen held on to win the special vehicle category and win a free entry into next year's Dakar Rally in South America. It was a prize worth around 250,000 Rand, and the reception given the competitors by the huge crowd at the finish again underlined the popularity of the Toyota 1000 Desert Race in Botswana.
The crowds at the finish of the race that stirs passion in Botswana seem to get bigger and more enthusiastic every year, with the winners and the also-rans given the same enthusiastic welcome.
And all that remained for the triumphant Toyota team was the traditional podium ceremony, with the disappointments of past years finally laid to rest in emphatic fashion.
Look, it's a great weekend for us. You know, we've tried hard, we've prepared hard for this race. It's an important one for Toyota to win. So the pressure was on us. We knew what type of conditions to expect. We set the cars up accordingly, and we're really ecstatic to have won this race.
A Toyota triumph, and after 1,000 kilometers of racing, just 35 seconds between first and second. A place on the podium was a great result for Christian de Ploy and Henk Janssen van Vieren, with Class D winners Louis Weichelt and Marek Bezuidenhout also in the top 10.
For special vehicle winners Evan Hutchison and Donnie Stassen, a maiden victory on the Toyota 1000 Desert Race was made all the sweeter with a free entry into next year's Dakar Rally.
Yeah, well chapped. 7 years, eh? I've been to this race for 7 years and I've never managed to win it. So, yeah, I'm relieved and very excited, very much so.
Final scoring in the special vehicle category and a comfortable margin of victory for Hutchison and Stassen. A solid 5th place saw Richard Fuller and Dennis Murphy, the only Class P crew to make it into the top 10.
Next week on Inside Off-Road Racing, we take you behind the scenes at the Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race. Catch all the action right here on Supersport, your world of champions.